In May 1943, Allied scouts discovered the Tiger 712, Germany's most feared armored weapon, in an olive grove outside Tunis, the feared machine. Capable of destroying Shermans from 2 kilometers away, was left intact and warm. The crew left it without demolition charges or sabotage, leaving it abandoned like a broken truck. However, the captured Tiger tank revealed a fatal flaw beyond its legendary 88mm gun and impenetrable armor. This revelation changed the understanding of armored warfare. February 14, 1943, Tunisia. American forces are about to learn a brutal lesson. The 1st Armored Division's Combat Command A sits at Fade Pass. Confident, perhaps too confident. Intelligence reports had been warning them for weeks about some new German super-heavy tank. 55 tons, 100 millimeters of frontal armor, a gun that could punch through anything the Allies fielded. Most American tankers dismissed it as British exaggeration. Propaganda, maybe? After all, they'd been handling Panzer IIs and IVS just fine. Then the Tigers arrived. Operation Frühling's wind hit like a sledgehammer. German forces, spearheaded by elements of the 21st Panzer Division and supported by Tigers from Heavy Tank Battalion 501, smashed into American positions. For the first time, American tank crews saw what nightmares looked like in steel. The Battle of Sidi Bouzid the next day became a masterclass in devastation. Combat Command C counterattacked with 52 Sherman medium tanks. 52. Against German forces that had set up a textbook ambush hand-tight guns in front. Tigers supporting from range. By the time the Americans withdrew, 46 of those 52 Shermans were burning hulks or disabled wrecks. Now here's where it gets interesting. 3 weeks later, investigators combed that battlefield, mapping every destroyed American tank, determining what killed each one. The results shocked everyone. Only one Sherman just one had been hit by an 88mm shell, either from a Tiger or a Towed 88 anti-tank gun. Most of the kills came from standard Panzer 350mm guns and Panzer 475mm guns. The Tigers were rare, but the psychological impact, absolutely devastating. This terror had a name. Army medical officers documented it officially. Tiger phobia. Tank crews who'd encountered these German heavies developed genuine psychological trauma. Just the report of Tigers in an operational area would cause American units to halt and demand air support and artillery preparation before advancing. One tank or even the rumor of one could paralyze entire formations. Think about that for a moment. The Tiger's tactical value multiplied exponentially beyond its actual battlefield presence. It wasn't just about what it could do, it was about what men feared it could do. Kasserine Pass. February 19th. American ground forces met experienced German armor in large-scale combat for the first time. Tigers participated, though in limited numbers. And the mathematics of engagement were brutally simple. American Shermans, with their 75mm guns, needed to close to within 300 meters, about 3 football fields, to have any chance of penetrating Tiger armor from the flanks or rear. The Tigers, they could engage effectively at 2,000 meters with virtual impunity from frontal attacks. You're a Sherman crew. You can see the Tiger. It can see you. And you absolutely know that it can kill you from where it sits. But you can't touch it unless you get close enough to practically shake hands with its crew. How do you advance into that? By March 1943, the problem was so severe that training materials had to be developed specifically to address Tiger phobia among American armored units. Intelligence summaries stressed that Tigers appeared in very limited numbers, that they had vulnerabilities, that proper tactics could neutralize their advantages. But those training materials could offer precious little practical advice to Sherman crews facing Tigers in direct combat beyond the deeply unsatisfying suggestion, call for artillery or air support. But something else was happening. Something the intelligence officers were starting to notice in captured documents and battlefield patterns. The final weeks of the Tunisian campaign in April and early May 1943 told a different story. Mechanical breakdowns, spare parts shortages, and fuel supply problems immobilized more Tigers than Allied action destroyed. Heavy Tank Battalion 501 had arrived in Tunisia with 20 Tigers and 16 supporting Panzer IIs. By late April, only a handful remained operational. The rest, abandoned or destroyed by their own crews as German forces collapsed, Battalion's war diary, captured by British forces and later shared with American intelligence, documented the deterioration week by week. December 1942 entries showed 20 Tigers operational upon arrival. By December 28th, only 14 remained operational, with 8 undergoing mechanical repair. Spare parts proved unavailable. Fuel supply was irregular and insufficient for sustained operations. By January 30th, 1943, only 11 Tigers remained operational. The diary noted fuel shortages were becoming critical. Each Tiger required continuous supplies of fuel, lubricants, and spare parts that German logistics in North Africa couldn't consistently provide. March entries reported only 6 operational Tigers. The others sat idle due to mechanical failures or fuel shortages. Requests for replacement engines were denied. Headquarters reported no engines were available anywhere in the theater. The April 20th entry captured the desperation. Allied offensives were breaking through all German positions. Orders came to retreat, but fuel supplies were sufficient only for limited movement. Numerous Tigers would have to be abandoned. Demolition teams were overwhelmed trying to destroy so much equipment. Some vehicles would inevitably fall into enemy hands intact. Tiger 712 never received demolition charges. Its crew, facing overwhelming Allied pressure and desperately short of fuel, abandoned the vehicle in that olive grove near Tunis. Whether they expected demolition teams to reach it or simply fled to survive remains unknown. The chaos of total military collapse left many questions unanswered. Lieutenant Sue of the 104th Tank Workshop, Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, documented the discovery of Tiger 712 on June 9, 1943. His report noted the tank stood, functional and intact, in an olive grove alongside other abandoned German vehicles, including at least 2 other Tigers and a Panzer III. The grove appeared to have served as a field workshop, with 1 Tiger's engine hatches removed. Demolition had completely destroyed 1 Tiger, but Tiger 712 remained untouched. The discovery electrified Allied intelligence communities. Colonel George B. Jarrett, chief of the Foreign Materiel Branch at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, received notification that American forces had secured an intact Tiger. This represented an unprecedented intelligence opportunity. Months, Allied forces had been fighting Tigers without fully understanding their capabilities or limitations. Now they possessed one to examine, measure, test, and analyze in exhaustive detail. But getting this monster back to America became an operation in itself. The recovery operation demonstrated the Tiger's extraordinary size and weight. Tiger 712 weighed 56.9 tons in combat configuration. American M31 tank recovery vehicles were designed to recover 30-ton Shermans. Moving the Tiger required multiple recovery vehicles working together, plus bulldozers and specialized heavy equipment. The convoy transporting Tiger 712 from the capture site to the port of Tunis moved primarily at night to avoid any residual Luftwaffe attention. Though by May 1943, German air power over Tunisia had effectively ceased to exist. Engineers had to evaluate every bridge for load capacity. Some roads couldn't support the combined weight of the Tiger and its transport trailer. The journey that normally required 4 hours took 3 days. At the port of Tunis, loading the Tiger aboard a ship presented another engineering challenge. The combined weight of the tank and its shipping cradle exceeded 65 tons, requiring heavy lift cranes rated at 70 tons or more. Port engineers located appropriate equipment and loaded Tiger 712 aboard the Liberty ship SS Samuel P. Bush for the Atlantic crossing. The voyage took approximately 3 weeks, with the ship arriving in Norfolk, Virginia, in early July 1943. From Norfolk, Tiger 712 traveled by special reinforced flat car to Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, arriving in mid-July 1943. And this is where the real story begins. Because what the engineers were about to discover would fundamentally change how the Allies fought the war. Aberdeen Proving Ground served as the U.S. Army's premier testing and evaluation facility for ordnance and armored vehicles. Engineers and intelligence officers had been preparing for months, studying captured German technical manuals, translating operational documents, and compiling battlefield intelligence reports. Brigadier General Gladian M. Barnes, Chief of Research and Development for Army Ordnance, sent explicit instructions to Aberdeen's testing teams. The captured Tiger represented an unprecedented opportunity to evaluate the enemy's most dangerous tank in detail. Testing would be comprehensive, covering armor protection, weapon effectiveness, mechanical reliability, mobility characteristics, and critically logistical requirements including fuel consumption and operational range. The initial inspection revealed sophisticated German engineering. The Tiger employed an interleaved road wheel arrangement with torsion bar suspension, offering superior weight distribution and cross-country performance. The Maybach Ulver transmission featured 8 forward gears and 4 reverse gears, allowing the Tiger to move as quickly backward as forward, a useful feature for tanks fighting defensively. The famous 88mm KWK-36 L56 gun could fire armor-piercing rounds at muzzle velocities exceeding 900 meters per second, with exceptional accuracy. The Tiger's armor protection impressed American engineers. Frontal hull armor measured 100 millimeters thick, with frontal turret armor also at 100 millimeters, and the gun mantlet varying from 120 to 200 millimeters. Hull side plates were 60 millimeters thick, with superstructure side armor at 80 millimeters. This armor protection rendered the Tiger effectively invulnerable to most Allied anti-tank weapons during frontal engagements. But then the engineers at Aberdeen noticed something in the German technical specifications that demanded immediate attention. The fuel capacity and consumption figures raised serious questions about the Tiger's operational viability. The tank carried 532 liters of fuel, approximately 140 U.S. gallons for fuel tanks located in the rear compartments. The 12-cylinder Maybach HL230 engine produced 690 horsepower, substantial power but barely adequate for the Tiger's 56.9-ton weight. Captured German operational documents with the tank specified an operational range of 195 kilometers on roads under ideal conditions, about 121 miles. Off-road range was listed at 110 kilometers, roughly 68 miles. These figures immediately concerned American engineers familiar with Sherman operational ranges. Even accounting for the Tiger's superior weight, the operational range seemed remarkably short. The testing program at Aberdeen ran from July 1943 to January 1944, 6 months of intensive evaluation covering every aspect of Tiger performance. Fuel consumption tests received highest priority because they directly affected operational capabilities. American military doctrine emphasized mobile warfare, requiring armored units to operate deep in enemy territory, sometimes hundreds of miles from supply bases. A tank with limited operational range posed severe strategic limitations, regardless of its tactical superiority. Paved road tests at steady cruising speed confirmed German specifications. Tiger 712 consumed approximately 195 liters per 100 kilometers on roads, equivalent to about 1.2 gallons per mile. This yielded a maximum theoretical range of about 117 miles on a full 140-gallon fuel capacity, closely matching German claims of 121 miles. However, cross-country tests revealed dramatically worse fuel consumption. Aberdeen's rough terrain course included hills, mud, sand, water crossings, and obstacles simulating combat conditions. Test runs over 32-mile courses with frequent gear changes consumed 132 gallons, leaving only 8 gallons remaining from the original 140-gallon load. This represented fuel consumption of 4.125 gallons per mile, reducing operational range to approximately 34 miles under realistic off-road conditions. Combat simulation tests produced even more alarming data. When test crews executed realistic combat tasks, including rapid acceleration and deceleration, frequent direction changes, turret traverse operations, extended idling periods, simulating observation, and heavy radio use, fuel consumption reached 6.1 gallons per mile. Under these intensive combat conditions, operational range dropped to approximately 23 miles before fuel exhaustion. Let that sink in. 23 miles. In combat conditions, this legendary tank could barely make it from one side of a county to the other before running dry. The test results painted a devastating strategic picture. The Tiger tank, while supremely capable in direct combat, couldn't sustain prolonged mobile operations. Its massive appetite for fuel demanded continuous resupply in quantities that would strain any logistics system. Under combat conditions, a Tiger battalion would require enormous fuel deliveries simply to remain mobile. Aberdeen engineers calculated the logistical burden. Each Tiger in active combat operations required approximately 1,500 to 2,000 gallons of fuel per week. A battalion of 20 Tigers needed 30,000 to 40,000 gallons per week just for the Tigers themselves, not counting supporting vehicles, half-tracks, trucks, reconnaissance vehicles, and other equipment essential to battalion operations. For comparison, American intelligence compiled fuel requirements for Sherman-equipped units. A typical American tank battalion, with 53 Sherman tanks, required approximately 65,000 gallons per week, including all battalion vehicles. German heavy tank battalions, with only 20 Tigers, required almost as much fuel for less than half the number of tanks. When supporting vehicle requirements were included, German heavy tank battalions actually consumed more total fuel than American medium tank battalions, despite deploying fewer than 40% of the tank numbers. Colonel Barnes compiled Aberdeen's test data into classified intelligence reports distributed to all Army Armored Commands in October 1943. The reports emphasized that Tiger tanks possessed formidable combat capabilities, including armor protection superior to all Allied tanks and a main gun effective beyond 2,000 meters. However, a critical vulnerability had been identified. Fuel consumption limited operational range to approximately 120 miles under ideal road conditions, reduced to 30 to 40 miles under realistic combat conditions. German logistics had to provide continuous fuel supply, or Tigers would be immobilized. Immobilized Tigers cannot fight. The reports recommended strategies for interdicting enemy fuel, its supply lines as effective methods for neutralizing Tiger threats. Intelligence officers cross-referenced Aberdeen's data with captured German supply documents, revealing the full scope of Germany's logistical nightmare in supporting Tiger operations. Analysis showed that German logistics in 1943 and 1944 could barely support Tiger fuel requirements even under favorable conditions. With Allied air power systematically destroying German supply lines, fuel shortages would inevitably limit Tiger effectiveness, and history proved them absolutely right. The Tiger's fuel consumption explained mysterious operational patterns that Allied intelligence had observed throughout 1943. German heavy tank battalions rarely operated more than 30 to 40 kilometers from established supply bases. Tigers avoided prolonged movement when possible. They frequently assumed static defensive positions rather than pursuing defeated enemies. This wasn't merely tactical preference, but logistical necessity imposed by limited operational range. War diaries from captured German units across multiple fronts confirmed the analysis. The SS Heavy Tank Battalion 101 War Diary from Normandy in summer 1944 documented recurring fuel shortages. The July 8th entry reported excellent combat results with 16 Sherman tanks and 3 Cromwell tanks destroyed for the loss of 1 Tiger to mechanical failure. However, fuel supplies were exhausted after 4 hours of combat. The battalion remained stationary, awaiting fuel trucks, while Allied forces withdrew. Pursuit was impossible due to fuel shortage. The July 20th entry reported fuel allocation reduced by 40% with orders to strictly conserve fuel. Tigers were restricted to defensive positions only with no offensive operations authorized until the fuel situation improved. The entry lamented that Europe's finest tanks sat idle for want of fuel. The August 6th entry reported 3 Tigers abandoned during withdrawal from the Falaise pocket. All were mechanically functional, but had empty fuel tanks with no fuel available for movement. Demolition charges were placed, but crews weren't certain if detonation succeeded. Crews evacuated on foot. British intelligence shared captured documents showing identical patterns on other fronts. Heavy Tank Battalion 503 records from Italy showed Tigers repeatedly immobilized by fuel shortages. The 5th SS Panzer Division Wiking archives from the Eastern Front told the same story of combat effectiveness paralyzed by inability to maintain fuel supplies. Everywhere Tigers operated, fuel shortages limited their effectiveness. American intelligence distributed tactical guidelines based on Aberdeen's findings to all combat units in November 1943. The directives advised that when encountering Tigers, units should avoid direct frontal engagement when possible. Instead, maneuver to force Tigers to reposition. Every mile a Tiger travels consumes significant fuel reserves. Extended maneuvering rapidly exhausts Tiger fuel supplies. Mobilized Tigers can be bypassed or destroyed with artillery and air support, rather than risking direct tank engagement. Training films produced in late 1943 incorporated the fuel consumption findings. One film titled Understanding German Heavy Tanks explained clearly that the Tiger tank consumed approximately 3 to 6 gallons of fuel per mile, depending on terrain and tactical situation. Sherman tanks consumed less than 1 gallon per mile under most conditions. This meant American tanks could maneuver 5 to 6 times farther on equivalent fuel. Crews were instructed to use their mobility advantage by making American formations chase Tigers, burning scarce German fuel, then strike when Tigers could no longer maneuver effectively. The Normandy campaign in summer 1944 validated Aberdeen's analysis perfectly. As Allied forces broke out from beachhead positions in July and August, German armored units found themselves unable to conduct mobile operations. Heavy tank battalions equipped with Tigers and Panthers remained immobilized, not from combat damage but from empty fuel tanks. American armored divisions advanced 130 miles in 7 days during the breakout. Tigers couldn't match this operational tempo, even with full fuel tanks. Their realistic combat range of 30 to 40 miles meant they could barely reposition between defensive positions, much less conduct mobile operations across the battlefield. France's liberation in August and September 1944 provided overwhelming physical evidence of the Tigers' fuel problems. Reconnaissance units found dozens of Tigers and Panthers abandoned along German retreat routes. Most showed no significant combat damage. All had empty fuel tanks. German crews had destroyed vehicles they could, but often lacked even the fuel necessary to conduct proper demolitions. Operational tanks were simply abandoned when fuel ran out. The Ardennes offensive in December 1944 exposed the fuel crisis catastrophically. German forces launched their last major Western offensive with strict fuel rationing. Each panzer division received fuel calculated for approximately 150 kilometers of movement, with operational plans assuming capture of Allied fuel depots for resupply. The plan failed completely. American forces held or destroyed fuel depots, and German armor ground to a halt across Belgium as fuel ran out. Kampfgruppe Peiper, spearheading the 6th Panzer Army's offensive, advanced 60 kilometers before fuel exhaustion stopped all movement. The battle group included Tigers from the 1st SS Panzer Division. Soldiers at Stoumont and La Gleize reported Tigers littering roadsides, immobilized by empty fuel tanks rather than combat damage. Major Hal D. McCown, an American officer captured by Kampfgruppe Peiper who later escaped, testified that German officers discussed the fuel situation openly. They desperately needed to capture American fuel depots. When American forces held the depots, the German offensive collapsed. McCown witnessed Tiger crews frantically siphoning fuel from disabled vehicles, trying to get at least a few Tigers moving. The fuel crisis was total and absolute. German archives captured after the war revealed that fuel shortages dominated German operational planning from 1943 onward. Each Tiger consumed approximately 300,000 gallons of fuel over its average service life. That same fuel quantity could have powered 7 Panther tanks or 18 Panzer IV tanks. Germany had chosen concentrated firepower over distributed capability and paid the strategic price in operational paralysis when fuel supplies dwindled. The final American assessment, prepared by Army Ordnance in March 1945, concluded definitively that the Tiger I heavy tank represented an exceptional design for individual combat performance but a catastrophic failure in logistical viability. Fuel consumption of approximately 1.2 gallons per mile on roads, increasing to 3 to 6 gallons per mile under combat conditions, rendered the Tiger operationally unsustainable in prolonged campaigns. German industry could produce these tanks. The German army could man them with skilled tank crews. But German logistics couldn't adequately fuel them, especially under constant Allied air interdiction of supply lines. After the war, Allied forces interrogated captured German tank designers and engineers. Henschel engineers who developed the Tiger admitted that concerns about fuel consumption were raised during the design phase, but were overridden by military requirements for maximum armor protection and firepower. Erwin Aders, a senior Henschel engineer, testified to Allied interrogators in May 1945 that engineers calculated during the design phase that the Tiger's fuel consumption would limit operational range to approximately 120 kilometers on roads significantly less under combat conditions. This was reported to Wehrmacht supply officers who acknowledged the limitation but insisted that the Tiger's combat superiority would enable quick, decisive victories before fuel became a critical limiting factor. History proved them wrong. Dr. Ferdinand Porsche, whose competing Tiger design was rejected in favor of Henschel's version, provided testimony explaining that both competing designs suffered from excessive fuel consumption. His design used gasoline-electric drive, which was even less fuel-efficient than Henschel's mechanical transmission. Engineers knew that no heavy tank weighing 55 to 60 tons could achieve acceptable fuel economy with technology available in 1942, but military command demanded the heaviest armor and most powerful gun, regardless of logistical consequences. The result was a tank that could dominate any individual battle but couldn't sustain campaigns. The Tiger's fuel consumption became a prominent teaching example in post-war military education. The U.S. Army Command and General Staff College used it extensively in logistics courses to illustrate a fundamental principle. A weapon that cannot be sustained in combat is not an effective weapon, regardless of its tactical performance. The Tiger tank, despite its fearsome reputation and genuine tactical superiority, ultimately proved this principle through thousands of examples across European battlefields. Superior tactical performance without logistical viability equals strategic failure. Tiger 712 remained at Aberdeen Proving Ground as a training exhibit until 1989, serving for 46 years as a physical reminder of logistics' importance in armored warfare. The tank that had terrorized Allied crews in 1943 became an educational tool teaching the critical relationship between tactical capability and strategic viability. Generations of American armored officers studied it, learning lessons about balancing firepower, protection, and mobility with sustainable logistics. In 1989, Tiger 712 was loaned to Germany for restoration and display. It eventually returned to the United States and currently resides at Fort Moore, Georgia, formerly Fort Benning, as part of the U.S. Army Armor and Cavalry Collection. The left side of the hull and turret remain open for educational purposes, revealing internal components to students. It stands both as monument and teaching tool, representing German engineering excellence that ignored operational viability constraints. The capture and testing of Tiger 712 provided intelligence that fundamentally shaped Allied tank tactics for the remainder of World War II. American tank crews learned that the formidable Tiger possessed a vulnerability more significant than any weakness in its armor scheme. It consumed fuel at rates that made sustained mobile operations impossible, facing Allied air interdiction and systematic attacks on German supply lines. Understanding this vulnerability allowed Allied forces to develop effective countertactics that neutralized the Tiger's advantages without requiring equivalent armor or firepower. Understanding the Tiger's fuel consumption influenced American tank design for decades after the war. The M48 Patton tank, developed in the 1950s, achieved fuel economy superior to 1 mile per gallon. Despite weighing 47 tons and mounting a powerful 90mm gun, American engineers remembered that mobility depends fundamentally on energy efficiency. And energy efficiency requires disciplined engineering choices, balancing multiple competing requirements. Lessons learned from Tiger 712 ensured that operational range remained a critical design parameter for all subsequent American armored vehicles. Modern main battle tanks continue the legacy of balancing firepower, protection, and mobility with sustainable logistics. The M1 Abrams, introduced in 1980, carries over 500 gallons of fuel and achieves approximately 0.6 miles per gallon, allowing operational range exceeding 300 miles on roads. Despite being a 70-ton vehicle powered by a gas turbine engine, the Abrams maintains sufficient operational range for deep strikes and mobile operations. Designers ensure that even the most powerful tanks can go the distance operationally, a lesson learned partly from Tiger 712. The Tiger 712 story teaches an enduring lesson about military technology. Superior weapons require sustainable logistics to achieve strategic effect. The world's most powerful tank becomes useless when immobilized, waiting for fuel trucks that never arrive. German engineering created a tactical masterpiece in the Tiger. German logistics couldn't support it in prolonged operations against enemies who controlled the air and systematically destroyed supply infrastructure. Allied forces exploited this vulnerability ruthlessly and effectively. The final assessment belongs to Colonel George B. Jarrett, who supervised all captured German equipment evaluation during and after the war. Written in June 1945, his summary assessment captured 3 years of testing and analysis. The German Tiger tank accomplished everything its designers promised tactically, provided superior armor protection, devastating long-range firepower, and excellent crew protection. But it failed strategically because it violated a fundamental military principle. Any weapon system must be sustainable in prolonged combat operations. The Tiger's fuel consumption, mechanical complexity, and extraordinary logistical requirements ultimately rendered it unsustainable in protracted war. Germany built an army around weapons it couldn't adequately support logistically. The Tiger perfectly illustrates this failure. Brilliant tactical capability cannot overcome inadequate strategic logistics. The Tiger proved this truth in thousands of burned-out and abandoned hulls scattered across Europe from Tunisia to Berlin. Tiger 712 stands today in climate-controlled storage at Fort Moore, Georgia. Its 88mm gun remains forever silent. The Maybach engine that so voraciously consumed fuel will never run again. But the lessons it taught continue resonating through every armor school, every logistics course, every staff college studying modern mechanized warfare. The principles are timeless and universal. The tank that terrorized Allied crews in 1943 became the teacher that shaped modern armored doctrine, not through its considerable strengths, but through its greatest weakness. The Tiger could dominate any individual battlefield through superior firepower and protection. But it couldn't reach distant battlefields, couldn't sustain prolonged operations far from supply bases, and couldn't survive the systematic fuel starvation that Allied air power and logistics targeting inflicted on German forces. A tank that travels only 120 miles on a full fuel load under ideal conditions, reduced to 30 miles under combat conditions, cannot win wars spanning entire continents. Germany learned this lesson through thousands of abandoned Tigers from North Africa to Normandy, to the Ardennes, to Berlin. America learned it through systematic testing of Tiger 712 and built an armored force that prioritized operational viability alongside combat capability. In mechanized warfare, the side that can sustain operations across distance and time wins. The Tiger forgot this fundamental rule. History never forgave that oversight. The capture and testing of Tiger 712 ensured that Allied forces fully understood that firepower means nothing without fuel to reach the battlefield. Armor protection means nothing without mobility to exploit tactical success. The world's finest tank means nothing without the logistical infrastructure to support it through prolonged campaigns in hostile territory under enemy air attack. Tiger 712 stands today as both monument and teacher, a monument to German engineering ambition that exceeded logistical reality and strategic viability. Teacher of the enduring principle that warfare requires sustainable systems engineering, not merely superior weapons. The most powerful weapon becomes an expensive stationary sculpture when it cannot move to the next battle. The Tiger tank proved this lesson definitively and repeatedly across European battlefields. The Americans who captured and tested it learned this lesson completely and incorporated it into doctrine. Modern armored forces constantly remember this lesson. The 60-ton steel beast that once terrorized battlefields now teaches quietly in a Georgia museum. Its greatest contribution to military history wasn't the enemy tanks it destroyed in combat, but the understanding it provided about the essential relationship between tactical excellence and strategic viability. In that paradox lies the complete story of Tiger 712, the world's most dangerous tank, ultimately defeated not by superior enemy weapons, but by its own insatiable appetite for fuel that German logistics could never adequately satisfy.